long story short, it became a lifeline for me. Um, and I guess struggling with pain, struggling with the difficulties that I was, and realizing there was a lifeline when the doctors really didn't have any painkillers for me. They could have prescribed me a whole, handbag full of drugs that they told me wouldn't be good for me in the long term. Sleep aids, painkillers, things like that. They weren't solutions. They were, here's a drug and you're 19 years old. You're going to be potentially on this for life. So, the doctors were like, this isn't the best idea. We can give it to you if you absolutely need it. And I was upfront and honest with them that I was finding benefit from something else, from cannabis.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Harmonia Podcast. We are joined here today by the amazing Alex. Hi, Alex.
There, Berta. Thanks for having me.
No worries. Thank you so much for coming on. How have you been?
I'm very good. Yeah, not too bad. Just enjoying the heat, the summer, finally.
I know, yeah, it's been so nice and hot lately. I'm almost scared to say something because I feel like I'm gonna jinx it.
Let's move on from the weather before it changes on us. That's the good idea.
Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Well, I took out all my summer dresses, so I'm hoping the weather will hold up long enough.
Fingers crossed for us. Fingers crossed. Are you well? Are you okay yourself?
Uh, Absolutely no, 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 no. I'm kind of dying right now. I'm sure you can hear it in my voice. My voice is cracking a bit. I've got a horrible headache. But you know what? That's nothing new. So let's get sucked into it. So Alex is here to join us today to talk a little bit about his patient experience and also about this amazing program called Release My Meds. But before we go into all of that, I just want to hand over to Alex to do a bit more of a formal introduction. Hi, Alex.
Sure thing. No, no, no problem at all. So I've been working now in medical cannabis in the UK in a sort of variety of different roles for about 10 years now. The last five of those is the easiest bit I can summarize. I've been working for a distributor of legal prescription cannabis medicines here in the UK by the name of Grow Pharma, and I'm the patient access lead for that company. So my job is very much to make sure that the company is doing the right things for patients, but also that the patients understand what the company is doing. All of that boring corporate stuff to aside, I think we are probably more interested in is where how I came to that role and everything that happened beforehand. So um, I was 19 years old. I'm now in my mid 30s. God help us. So I was 19 years old when I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease. It was my first year of university, studying music in Brighton, and this came out of nowhere. I mean, I had eczema as a child. I had a few sort of what I call mild immune issues, hay fever, allergies, and eczema. Nothing out of the ordinary. And then, 19 years old, was hit with this diagnosis that had come on the back of probably, somewhere around 6 to 8 weeks of basically thinking I was just very, very unwell. Didn't know if it was a stomach bug that was persisting. You're vomiting, you're going to the bathroom a lot, not sleeping, not eating, losing a lot of weight. So they rushed me in to do all the tests and eventually, actually, relatively quickly got that diagnosis in a matter of weeks, maybe months, not years, as I know it takes some people. And obviously that changed my life forever. Coming to terms with that was incredibly difficult as a young man. The limitations it was going to have on my career, on my life, on my physical, ability to do almost anything. It was really difficult to deal with. Um, and I struggled a lot with those symptoms for a long time. It happened that I was already a cannabis consumer, um, pretty casually, weekends, maybe at band practice, bit of creative juices flowing sort of situation. Nothing compared to I say nothing compared to how much I use it now. How often I use it now might be a better way to put it, or how much I then became to need it, I suppose. Um, and that which was this very casual thing I quite soon realised was having a really positive effect on my symptoms. I'd go to band practice and I'd be in a lot less pain. I think initially I thought it was the music. I was like, oh, I'm losing myself in the music, and I'm just getting so into this that I forget about it. Actually, it was that I was consuming cannabis beforehand, and it was helping relieve my pain, helping relieve my nausea, helping me, do that work, write songs, work with people, create music, and do the things that I love doing. It also helped me sleep. That's something I've always had a difficulty with, and I suppose probably if I was using cannabis in any medical sense before then, it was probably when I had difficulty sleeping. Um, but it became absolutely essential in order for me to get off to sleep. That's not just helping me, reduce the pain and the nausea and relax the mind, but also limiting the number of toilet trips, which I don't think people realize that cannabis can do very effectively for those with an overactive bowel and I believe bladder as well. That you take cannabis and it will drastically reduce how much you need to do that. So you get better sleep, you get better rest. Long story short, it became a lifeline for me. Um, and I guess struggling with pain, struggling with the difficulties that I was, and realizing there was a lifeline when the doctors really didn't have any painkillers for me. They could have prescribed me a whole, handbag full of drugs that they told me wouldn't be good for me in the long term. Sleep aids, painkillers, things like that. They weren't solutions. They were, here's a drug, and you're 19 years old. You're going to be potentially on this for life. So, the doctors were like, this isn't the best idea. We can give it to you if you absolutely need it. And I was upfront and honest with them that I was finding benefit from something else, from cannabis. And I guess after a while, I just became incredibly frustrated that I was still having to source this illegally and take these risks that come with that. I guess in Brighton, as a young man, those risks are minimised. It's probably one of the more friendly areas of the UK with cannabis. Uh, so, but I think the thing is, as you get older and as you realise what that means to be sourcing your medicine illegally, and when those risks become not some casual occasional thing, but a sort of daily routine of having to source something to get by, it starts to be very frustrating. I can't have an honest conversation with my doctor really about these things, because even those who are supportive would sort of say, look, great, do your thing, glad it's working, but we can't help you. And eventually, I suppose I met lots of other people who were very frustrated as well. People with other diseases, people with Crohn's disease, people with all sorts of issues, and they same as me, found that cannabis had helped them. I think a lot of people had seen the progression that had happened in the United States with, particularly with medical cannabis, which is all around sort of the mid 90s, I suppose it starts, but it gets going around the sort of 2005 to 2010 era. And just the absolute frustration that in a common sense country like the UK, what feels like, it's very a British point of view, but what feels like a common sense country where people have access to the things they need, that we couldn't get this, but there were states of the US that were progressing, and other parts of the world. So we decided to campaign, and we put together an organisation called the United Patients Alliance, and I worked with them as a director running that organisation for the best part of 4.5 years, and we organised events across the UK, community events. We organised protests. We took delegations of patients to Parliament. We did media appearances. We pestered the local news. We pestered mainstream media. And I guess for me personally, I guess the pinnacle of my work there in terms of my visibility was Good Morning Britain, which I was on in, oh God, I think it was spring 2016, I think, if I'm getting that right. And that I woke up the next morning from that with my social media going crazy, and from that point onwards, what was, I suppose, casual activism. It wasn't casual; it didn't feel casual, but in hindsight, casual activism was like, right, this is something I'm doing now. I'm known for this. I'm getting attention for this, in a really positive way too. I say getting attention. Before I did Good Morning Britain, my mum called me up. She said, "Please don't, Alex. Don't go on national TV and talk about cannabis. Think about your career. Think about your future." And that's good advice. Actually, she was right to give that advice. It's not a criticism. Um, but then I woke up the next day to literally thousands of messages of people saying, "Oh, thank you for raising this. I suffer with this. I'm struggling with this. We're really happy to see you talking about this issue." And yeah, I think once you realize that you're able to do that for a sort of unspoken community, that I was willing to take that risk and talk openly about this, and I was frustrated enough that it didn't matter to me hugely. You realize that there's a huge amount of value in that, and I guess that's what I've been doing ever since. Really, just representing those who need this as a medicine, and yeah, doing my best I can to proliferate that, normalize it as a just as any medicine would be, whilst obviously having to manage the caveats in the crazy world that is cannabis, which is a whole other conversation we could have. I'm aware that I've given you quite an in-depth bio there. I hope I've not overrun my time.
No, God, no. Thank you so much for sharing your experience. First of all, as somebody who was diagnosed at quite a young age as well, not as young as you, I was 22. Well, no, diagnosed at 23, but experiencing symptoms for a whole year prior to that. And you mentioned like a few things that I actually took a few notes down about, right? So let's break this down. You've got me excited here. So sleep. Sleep is something that, I mean, I'm always screaming about, well, mostly to my GPs, right? Because I, like you, have really, really bad insomnia. Absolutely nothing helps me sleep, not even cannabis. It just does my head in. So I hear stories like you, and I'm like, very jealous because I'm like, how is he sleeping? What is he using to sleep? Because it's not working for me. I've tried it all. But one of the things that's really important about sleep is that sleep is restorative. Somebody with a chronic illness, whether it is physical health or mental health, it is essential that you get your sleep in because it does impact on how you're going to feel the next day. So I just really wanted to just emphasize on that point there. And then there was like two other things that you mentioned that I thought is really important to touch on because it's sort of like the premises for why I even do advocacy in the first place. So you mentioned taking a risk about sharing your experience. I completely understand you. I was the same as you. I work in health and social care, but predominantly in the children and family sector. So you can imagine with myself on a cannabis prescription, I was really, really reluctant to say anything about it, to speak up about it because the minute you do mention it, everybody is looking at you. And so there's all these concerns then that are raised around my prescription being around children. And I would always explain to my employers, you had no issues when I was on diazepam and tramadol around children. I mean, this is an actual safer medication. My brain is not as clogged as it was then. And the saddest part is as well, regardless of what medication you were on, you get used to it. You do. Yeah, you get used to the feeling and you get used to actually just feeling so groggy and sedated all the time that it becomes your normal. And that's just what it is. Not a great way to live, but such is life. Um, but one of the reasons why I say it's so important is because I was the same. I got so much pushback from people saying don't speak up, don't speak up, don't speak up, and then I spoke up, and then like yourself, so many people reached out to me, and I was absolutely in tears because I remember the amount of people that reached out and explained that they themselves were struggling with a, I suppose, hidden disability, because in our cases people can't actually see our disability or our illnesses. I know some people don't like it being called disability, and and which I didn't even know they were going through. And they just explained how it was very empowering for them now to not only recognize that there is, that they can speak up about what they're going through, but also that there's alternative medicines to manage it. Because a lot of them, like yourself, didn't want to go, and myself didn't want to go on half the medications that are required for managing our conditions. And I think that really brings me back to the next point, which is the fear of your future, the fear of what your future is going to look like now that you have a diagnosis. And a lot of that, for me, I know, and I know from a lot of people that I've spoken to, is medications and how this impacts your ability and quality of life. And I remember, I remember you said something earlier that made me think about when I went to see the rheumatologist nurse, and she was like, so we're going to start you on these medications here. Sign here to say that you are okay with the fact that it could give you type 2 diabetes in the future. And it was, the way she said it was so casual, as if it was nothing. You might get type 2 diabetes in the future, but here, sign here. Yep, yep, yep. Meanwhile, you tell somebody you're on a medical cannabis prescription, it's not going to give me. I mean, there are risks. There are some risks with in terms of low blood sugar and how that can impact you. Because people who do use recreationally do end up with type 2 diabetes because of this. But again, there is safeguarding when it comes to medications. So Sorry, those are the 3 points that I just thought I really, really wanted to flag because it's so important. And in terms of challenging the stigma when it comes to medical cannabis, particularly when it comes to patients feeling more and more confident about, of course, there's police.
Just as you mentioned patient confidence, how funny. Because if there's one reason why they might not be confident, they're the police, their employers. Yeah, it's funny.
And the funniest thing is, this is literally the point I was just about to get to, which is this brings us to release my meds, right? You have a lot of patients that are not confident about bringing their medication out. And I'm going to be honest with you, I am one of those patients, right? I've said it here before on this podcast. I am black. I do not feel comfortable taking my prescription out with me in case I get stopped or something happens. And even worse, right? I also do not feel comfortable. And no, when I do take it out with me, I take out a ration, basically the medication that I need. I won't take out what I need. I know a lot of people are like, bring everything with you, your tubs, your this and that. And I'm always like, well, A, if I get caught with a lot of medication, I don't want that issue with the police. I've got enough issues in my life. B, I do not want you to confiscate the medication that I rely on because after a while of me not being on my prescription, I am bedbound. So I take out only a little bit of my medication and struggle while I'm out because of the risk of my medication being seized from me and the hassle of having to try and replace that medication. First of all, the costs. This is a ridiculous cost. You have to pay to replace that medication. And second of all, the fact that I sadly rely on my medication on a daily basis. If I do not have my medication regularly, then my health quickly starts to deteriorate. And a lot of people, like, I mean, I'm going to take, for example, somebody with epilepsy. That person can have a seizure and die. Are you serious? Like, police really should not be taking medications from patients. I mean, just. Anyways, before I go on a crazy rant, I'm going to hand back over to you because I know that your campaign, Release My Meds, is doing amazing work around addressing this very, very serious concern.
Yeah, look, I think the first thing to say is it's release is not it's not my campaign. It's a campaign that I've helped and worked on in the background. Just to be completely clear, um, and I'll explain how that came about. So, in my role, I very much have to deal with people like yourself, and I'm one of you. I'm a patient myself. So those fears essentially revolve around patients coming across various authorities in their life. So it's I don't think that's a police dog. I hope not. Um, they're people, yeah, patients. I mean, naturally have fears. There's still this pervasive stigma around cannabis use in the UK. I think a lot of people they might know that medical cannabis sort of exists, maybe in other parts of the world. I don't think they necessarily know it's legal here. And I think there's still a sort of underlying presumption that cannabis is associated with illegality, with immorality, with sort of feckless laziness, and that whole sort of stereotype, which is absolutely absurd. And we can talk about that stereotypes one I love to bust. We'll talk about that later on, but don't let me go down a tangent because I'll never stop. So I have to deal with patients and manage them and their concerns and their issues when inevitably they do come across these authorities in their life who are not aware. And it's not just police. Police is the most serious one, of course, but it's landlords, it's employers, it might be colleagues and friends and family as well. And most of the time, my role in this is to send a polite email and say, look, this is legal. It's been legal since 2018. Here's the legislation. Here's how this works, particularly in the context of whatever they're dealing with. If they're dealing with employment, then the idea about making reasonable adjustments for these people to medicate while they're at work. And you just explain legislation, you explain how it works, and 99 times out of 100, that's it. And that's the end of the conversation. And the person goes, oh, I actually had no idea. And you're a real pharmacy, and this is all a real thing. I'm like, yeah, absolutely, 100%. Here's an Instagram post where we did some education for this police force, and here's this doctor on this podcast that I've done who's telling you about how he prescribes it. If you want more, if you want to learn more about this, there's plenty of information, and we provide it, and it's as simple as that. And I think these issues come up because this isn't universal. It's not 100% of the time, and it should be. It's a legal prescribed medicine. It should be very straightforward. You should show your prescription. All authorities in the UK are generally trained on prescriptions and how prescriptions work and how discrimination legislation works in relation to prescription medicines. Venue owners was the other one I should have mentioned earlier in the list, and that's a really good example, point to make to them. If you need to take your medication while you're going to a gig or a festival or something like that, then they need to have a policy for how that works. And what we get is they default onto vaping legislation or nicotine vaping legislation, which is a separate thing entirely to prescription medication. Um, and ultimately, they don't have policies, and they have to develop them very fast, or they have to, create allowances for whatever the circumstances. Unfortunately, what we do see, because the media have picked up on it a few times, and also because we have some very active forums on social media for people who are prescribed cannabis medicine, which can be great and very helpful places if you're not already part of those on places like Reddit and Facebook. Um, and we do see people who are coming across police, and sometimes they're arrested, sometimes their medications are confiscated. And naturally, for anyone who's got a prescription, that's very distressing to see. Um, and the first thing I say every time this comes up, and every time I'm talking about this, is that these are the exceptions. So, like I say, 99% of the time, whether it's police or anybody else, you tell them the legislation is the legislation, you present your prescription, it is what it is, and they let you get on your way. I spoke to a young gentleman just this morning who had a letter saying, "Oh yeah, we stopped you. We thought you were drug driving. You tested positive for cannabis. Oh, but now we've gone back, referred to our notes, seen you've got a prescription. Please carry on. We're sorry for having bothered you." And it's taken a week or two for him to get that letter. Clearly, some anxiety over his head, but all done and dusted. And I love seeing those letters when they come through. It's very satisfying. And it's the norm. I guess that's the point to make. The exceptions are few and far between, and they are distressing, and they are ridiculous. And you know, when they happen, and there's that additional work to be done, we invite them to come to the pharmacy to do education. We provide them with obviously all the legislation. We email them all the details. We even link up patients with lawyers who are very experienced and knowledgeable about cannabis law, and who are often willing to give some of their time for free, at least in those sort of preliminary stages of a case where they're just explaining legislation to people. So what essentially happened is me and one of these lawyers got really annoyed and I suppose really bored of it, really bored of having to keep reiterating UK law that's over 5 years old to the UK police whose job it is to enforce it. And I went away and had to think about how do we solve this in a long-termist way, because we're mopping up as we go here, and it might just be drips, and it might be less drips than it used to be, but we're still having to mop this up, and there's still people's lives on the line here. And when people aren't properly defended, it's interesting that this morning there's a guy with being allowed to keep his driving license and keep driving. There was an instance in the paper, in a local paper, a couple of weeks ago, where the patient essentially hadn't defended himself well in court, or his solicitor didn't know the legislation or the law and hadn't done the job properly, and he'd had his driver's license taken away. I think he had a fine in the hundreds, I think £600 or £700, and I think he lost his license for 6 to 12 months or something to that effect. And it's tragic, because I wish that person had reached. They were anonymous, so I don't know who they are. If they're out there, I would love to help you get your license back. I'm sure we can do it, in a couple of weeks, months turnaround, and get you driving again. And it's tragic when you see that reported in the media. And again, it scares the entire patient population, sees these and gets scared. And I have 1,000 inquiries the next day because of this piece in the paper where, and he doesn't say, it says the patient said he was prescribed. Okay, well, but was he prescribed? We don't know. So there's a lot we don't know about that article, and I guess we have to just bear that in mind, that and that the law is the law on driving and cannabis, and we can talk about that later on too if you want. But essentially, tangents. I told you, didn't I? Me and my lawyer friend got very frustrated and had to think about what can we do to solve this long term. And the answer we've come up with is release my meds. So it's hashtag release my meds. We're calling it the Release My Meds campaign because we're utilizing, thankfully, and we're very grateful for doing so, an organization called Release. Release are a drug law advocacy organization based in the United Kingdom. They've been active since the 60s. So, a long, long time, over 60 years here in the United Kingdom, working on, legal issues within drug laws, defending people who've been caught up in drug legislation. For example, someone who's been coerced into doing drug trafficking. Well, is that person a mule or is that person a victim? And defending that person in an appropriate and informed way. So they're a fantastic organization. I really can't sing their praises enough. Just want to give you an example of the sort of fantastic work that they do. And We went to them and we had a conversation about how can we resolve this. And I think initially they didn't quite believe it was happening, to the extent that it was. And not that they well, oh no, this is silly, don't be silly. It was sort of a really, and they had the medicines taken away and they didn't give them back, and right, okay, and they were in a cell overnight and all these things, which does happen on the rare occasions. um, and so it's a job to convince them, and I guess that's to a point still where we're at, but we've set up a framework for that convincing, shall we say. And the issue ultimately is we need to convince lawyers not that these things are happening, but that there is a serious legal case to be made to defend patients generally, and to ask for a review of the legislation, and potentially further action beyond that. So Release My Meds is a really simple initiative. It's on the Release website. It's at, well, let me find it, release.org.uk/medical-cannabis-campaign. If you search for Release, you'll find the website, and it's in the menu there under, I believe it's the Law and Rights tab. Yeah, there it is, Release My Meds. So you can go there. If you had an instance with the police where they've detained you, arrested you, confiscated your medicines, or anything that you believe is unlawful activity, even if they've just prevented you from going about your day for a period of time for no good reason, we want to hear these instances. The Release My Meds campaign is just a form to fill out on their website. Essentially, that's all it is from the patient point of view. You fill out the form, you tell them what's happened, and they are there and can potentially provide these expert legal opinions. They can't promise to support you and be your lawyer for the court cases, but certainly they can have a look and review your case and provide the best advice that they can. And the additional thing to understand, and the important thing in the back end of the campaign, is we are collating these instances, and we have law firms that are well trained in the background on class action lawsuits, on bigger court cases that involve multiple people, collating these and reviewing these instances. So it's an if and when scenario. If and when we get to a point where these lawyers think, right, well, there's a serious case here, we can take this on and we can make a difference for these people, then we'll have a think about what those next steps are. We'll have to re-engage the patients who submitted their information, ask if they want to be a part of this, and obviously we'll go from there. It's one of those where I can't sit here and say we're going to sue the police, but certainly if there is a need to, then we can consider doing something like that as a collective, as a group. Whether or how that will happen, I can't say. It's that sort of first step towards the only ways of solving something like this long term. And it's only because of dealing with people in these incredibly emotional issues that we are looking at this in such a sort of, what's the word? I guess a formal and structured and sort of long termist way. It sounds really boring, I guess, on the face of it. It's just a form, it's just lawyers. But I truly believe this is the first step to really meaningfully resolving this issue and making sure it doesn't ever happen again. Um, so we launched it was actually 420. We launched on the 20th of April this year. It's now the 28th of June. I think there's been somewhere between 10 and 20 reports in that time. So these things are still happening. There's about 40,000 patients in the UK. 10 and 20 in a couple of months is probably about what I was expecting. It's probably a bit more than I was expecting, to be honest. But it's that bittersweet of, okay, great, people are feeding back and we're building this case, but also we're getting a real view on how severe this issue is. Um, we may have to produce a report at some point. That might be part of the process. I don't know how much I can say about the individual cases and the severity and the sort of instances that have happened, because all of this is obviously very confidential and potentially in what we're doing in the future. But that's where we're at. I hope that explains it. Uh, it's really important to me, to be honest with you. It's when we were campaigning for 4.5 years with people who were dying of cancer, standing up for this, people who had MS and diseases that were, they should have been out living their lives and recovering and doing all that work. And the fact that I know all of these people that stood up and spent their energy and their time and their years on this planet fighting for this law change, and we got that and we won, and we had that law change and we can get cannabis prescribed in the UK, and still people are being arrested despite having gone to the efforts of getting themselves a prescription and paying for illegal medicine. It's just offensive to me. I can't live with that. So I'm gonna fix it whether it kills me. But you're so furious on behalf of the advocates that you end up being an advocate and a campaigner once again. So here we are. And I want to say a huge thank you to Release. I want to say a huge thank you to the lawyers involved. They know who they are, and I won't name them, and I think they'll appreciate me for doing so, or for not doing so. I also want to say thank you to the police that have engaged positively, because they are out there, and I was emailing police officers this morning about updates to bits and pieces of regulations and all that interesting stuff. So there are police officers who are engaged and aware, and actually working to help resolve this too. So I want to say a huge thank you to those guys. In fact, they've invited myself and Dr. Sunny Nai of Integro Clinics to go and do an event at. I'm not going to get it right. It's an event in October, November time, that is essentially for all the drug liaison officers to get together and have a conversation about those specific laws and rules. And we're going to go into a presentation on prescription cannabis and how it works in the UK, and hopefully that makes some difference as well. So we're doing what we can. I think as an industry, I think there's always more that can be done. I guess if there's anything I'd ask of industry, it's that those who have a toe in this field, if you're a clinic or a pharmacy, anyone who's patient facing in prescription cannabis medicines in the UK should know about Release My Meds, should have it on their website, it should be in your emails, it should be at hand every single time somebody has an incident with the police related to their medicines, and you think something untoward has happened. It needs to be reported there. It needs to be part of this bigger thing. Like I say, I'm not on the back end of this. I don't see these reports. I hear little bits back and forth about the number and the severity and the sort of instances, but because I'm in the industry too, so there's GDPR stuff. I'm on the outside, and that what that enables, of course, is that this is an independent campaign. Everyone can get involved in it. It's non-partisan. So this is me going out to all the clinics we work with, but also all the clinics and all the pharmacies, all the competitors, everybody in this space needs to be pushing this. For that reason. I love that they're in the background, just letting us know they're there.
I swear to God, yeah, I don't know what is going on, but all I know is that, the town is lit today by the looks of it. Jesus. you know? Um,
Let us pray it's not someone with a prescription or someone who's not doing anything untoward. That's
yeah. But no, Alex, thank you so much. And you actually mentioned something that I actually found very interesting, which was 10. There's only been 10 reports. And I think this, for me, feels like there is definitely a need for this. I definitely agree with you. Let's get anybody who is prescribing medical cannabis to make all patients aware of this, because I know for myself, when I worked as a registered manager for one of the cannabis clinics, I can assure you I got 10 in a week, more than 10 GDPR requests in a week. Yeah, because the police would have to confirm with the clinic that it's an actual prescription, so they would need to put forward a subject access request. So I would deal with those, and I can assure you it was definitely more than 10 a week. So I think definitely getting the clinics on board would be absolutely fantastic for patients. And also, as many as we can sue, let's sue. No, because it's absolutely ridiculous.
the patients are all for it. I like it though. It's good. It shows that there's this appetite for it and that we're outraged. And I think it's the right thing.
No, completely. And I agree with you. I think the majority of us that do advocacy started like yourself, which is we got pissed off, like, and we're like, you know what, enough is enough now. Now I'm gonna start talking, and that's it. So come on, people, start suing. Yeah, release my meds exists. If they can help, they will help.
It's 10 to 20. It's 10 to 20 since April, and then there was the Guardian piece that came out in November last year, and that said they had about 25 to 30 people, and that was on a call out over a couple of weeks that they did through the Guardian. So it's always a snapshot of this, isn't it? So it's at the time to fill out the thing properly. Who's wanted to do that in the first place? If you're having one of these incidents, you might wait until it's resolved to fill it out. So yeah, we're trying to get that word out there, but I think it's also a good thing too. I'm glad it's not in the hundreds. I'm glad that we didn't put that out into the world, and then we realized that this was happening a lot more than we expected and anticipated. So hopefully it's good that and we're not the only people doing education for police. hopefully these things are meaning that this is going to happen less often. I'm hopeful that this doesn't lead to anything really, that we don't have to do any mainstream, any sort of severe legal action or anything like that. But I guess it's just preparing just in case.
That's a nice way of putting it.
Yeah, trying to keep all sides happy. Can you tell? I don't want to disengage with the police. It's good that we're working with them. I don't want to threaten them. I think that's the really important thing. I think it's about, and that, when we're talking about suing the police, the outcome that I want isn't to punish the police. It's not a vendetta, it's not I'm not after vengeance here. It's that the patient in the incidents involved need to get whatever compensation a judge feels and a jury feels is reasonable. That's a separate thing. But what I want is to make sure that the police are armed with the education that they need, the knowledge that they need, having a full understanding of this field, as far as they need to do their job properly and not get caught up in anything like this, bothering legal patients and getting involved in legal action. I don't think the police want that. I don't think they are out there trying to get cannabis users like Batman and Robin trying to clean up crime. I think it's something they get caught up in, and because of the policy and because of the procedures that they've been taught, and because that's not been changed since 2018. If you're stopped at the roadside and they think you might have had cannabis or they can smell cannabis, they'll test you. You'll go over the limit, and then they'll have to go away and make sure that you're able to keep your driving license. And we know that the limit doesn't apply. So it's yeah, sorry.
No, and for me, this is precisely the reason why they need to be sued. Because nothing is ever going to change until they start to realize, oh crap, this is really serious, and we should actually be updating our policies and processes around this so that we can facilitate medical cannabis patients. Like, so I'm all down the line of if you can sue, guys, sue. Right? They need, no, 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 people need to start learning. You can't take away somebody's medication that they rely on. Do you know how many patients I've had on the phone and absolute tears, and they don't know how they're going to be able to afford their medication for the rest of the month? And then because they can't afford their medication, have to go to their GP and get prescribed opiates, and which for somebody who was taking copious amounts, for some of us it does nothing for us. So we're just pumping ourselves with something that's barely giving us relief, but it's giving us enough so that we have no choice but to pump it, overdosing on those medications because we have no, because it doesn't do anything, so we have to overdose on those medications. Like, there's such a huge ripple effect that people just don't understand. And when we don't have our medication, that means you're bedbound, that means you're unable to exercise, you're not really getting the best diet in you either, you're struggling, your symptoms have manifested. Like, it's just unacceptable, especially since this medication is legal. So yeah, if you can sue, get on Release My Meds. The links will be in the description section. But before we head off, because I just realized the time, we need to round things off, Alex. Alex, have you got any advice for cannabis naive patients?
Wow. Okay. Naive patients. I suppose yes. Those who've never come across it or never consumed cannabis. I think put down any preconceptions you have about what cannabis is. I think if you've known people who've used it illegally, if you've been to Amsterdam, whatever your personal sort of experience and knowledge is, maybe you've just watched Friday or How High or one of those films. You have that sort of idea of it as a recreational thing. I think putting down those preconceptions and um, understanding that the context makes a big difference to how you use and take a substance. And I think the comparison with opiates is I know we're not big fans of opiates, but the comparison with something like heroin or a street a drug that's just been made by someone to sell it on to people in a legal context versus giving someone painkillers when they've broken their leg. The two situations couldn't be far removed, but the actual compound at the center of that is probably the same thing doing something similar. So there are drugs, there are medicines that we've used for hundreds of years that have recreational use, that can be used in negative ways, can be produced illegally and can be cut and can be contaminated. And then the very same things can be medicalized, pharmaceuticalized, given with the doctor's oversight. And they can be enormously helpful to people for all sorts of things that you couldn't imagine. And I guess if there's anything else, I suppose, just have a look at the endocannabinoid system. If there's any sort of aspiring scientists and geeks and people who want to read up about the juicy details behind this, the endocannabinoid system is a fascinating system. It explains why cannabis does so many different positive things for the human body. because it's the underlying regulatory system managing all these different functions. It's just fascinating. I won't bore you about it here. There's plenty of podcasts on the endocannabinoid system. I won't try to compete with the doctors and scientists from Canada and Israel and the rest of the world that have been doing this work. So, yeah, go out and research it, and hear from the doctors and the researchers and the scientists. Don't get your information from stoner films. uh, and yeah, and look into it. If it's something that you think might be useful for you, you're not committed to it. You're not going to go crazy having had one toke on something, one inhalation or whatever. Give it a go, see how you feel, and if it's not for you, it's not for you. It's not for everyone, but you might find a lifeline. And I think people are often pleasantly surprised by how manageable it is as a medication. That it doesn't get you stoned all the time. There's sort of getting used to that a little bit. Like you say, you get used to your medication, and the benefits people see is, yeah, I love my job because I get to help people. It's as simple as that. I get to help people when they run into the police, but I also get to help people day to day anyway who've just got pain or anxiety or depression or whatever it is. And they've run out of options. And I get to say, well, look, there's one more thing that you can try this, and we'll see.
And I think that that is a perfect note to end it on. Thank you so much for joining us here today, Alex.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me. I really, really enjoyed having a chat with you about this.
No, me too. Thank you so much. And like I said, for anybody that is interested in any of the work that Alex is doing, actually with Grow and with Release, the links will be in the description section. My brain is already starting to go because we've been here focusing for long enough. I can already feel it drowning. So this is a perfect time to end. Thank you all for coming on here today, and we look forward to seeing everybody next week. Bye.
Bye, everyone.